We, the family, asked the court to sterilize Sierra Harp to prevent any more children being born. We also asked for the highest punishment of life without parole.
He knew he was going to die. And instead of running, instead of fighting back with everything he had left, Raheem Grant did something that would end up outliving him. He reached for his phone, laid it down beside him, and pressed record. 13 minutes. That's how long the recording runs. 13 minutes of a man begging for his life, while the mother of his child pulled the trigger, again and again and again. 7 bullets, 1 phone, 1 3-year-old girl watching it all happen in front of her. This isn't a case built on circumstantial evidence, gut feelings, or courtroom guesswork. This is a case where the killer's own voice is on tape, cursing at the man she was murdering, while he pleaded, told her she'd go to prison, and asked, near the very end, just to hold his daughter one more time. Welcome back to Crime Autopsy. I'm going to walk you through every layer of this case, the toxic relationship that led to it, the recording that convicted her, the courtroom explosion nobody in that building will ever forget, and the sentence that made national headlines. If you're new here, hit that subscribe button and ring the bell, because we dissect real cases like this every single week. The evidence, the psychology, the aftermath. And I want to know what you think as we go, so drop your reactions in the comments. Let's get into it. Before there was a courtroom, before there was a jury, before there was a recording, there were 2 people. Sierra Harp and Raheem Grant. According to court testimony and reporting from Channel 2 Atlanta, the 2 had been together for at least 4 years, and they shared a daughter. On paper, that sounds like an ordinary relationship. In reality, according to family members on both sides, it was anything but. Here's where this case gets complicated fast. And I want you to pay close attention, because both sides tell wildly different stories. And that conflict is exactly what a Clayton County jury had to untangle. Sierra Harp's version, the one she gave police right after the shooting, was self-defense. She said Raheem Grant had beaten her that night and that she shot him because she feared for her life. But Raheem Grant's family paints a completely different picture. His mother, Geraldine Grant Bryson, said her son was the one being abused, emotionally and psychologically, by Harp. She said the relationship had become so volatile, so unpredictable, that she gave her son a piece of advice that would end up being the single most important decision of the entire case. If things ever got dangerous again, pull out the phone, record it, lay it down where she can't see it, and let it capture whatever happens next. Raheem Grant listened to his mother. And on the night of December 29, 2017, in his own apartment in Clayton County, Georgia, he needed that advice more than he could have ever imagined. Picture it. It's the week between Christmas and New Year's, a time when most families are still riding out the holidays, decorations still up, leftovers still in the fridge. Instead, inside a Clayton County apartment, an argument is escalating between Sierra Harp and Raheem Grant. We don't know the exact trigger. What we do know, because it's documented in reporting and later court filings, is that Grant sensed where this was heading. He remembered what his mother told him. He picked up his cell phone, set it down nearby, without Harp's knowledge, and pressed record. What that phone captured next is almost impossible to process as a bystander. Prosecutors say Harp shot Grant multiple times over a period spanning roughly 13 minutes. Not 1 shot, not 2 shots in a sudden burst of panic. Multiple gunshots stretched across minutes, minutes in which Raheem Grant was still alive, still conscious, still talking. On the recording you can hear him. He tells her that she is going to spend a long time in prison if she keeps shooting him. Think about that for a second. In the middle of what is happening to him, he is not only trying to survive, he's trying to warn her, trying to reach whatever part of her might still stop. It didn't stop. Later reporting would reveal even more gut-wrenching detail, that at one point during those final minutes, Grant asked for water and expressed a desire to hug his daughter one more time. His 3-year-old daughter, the child he shared with the woman who was shooting him, was in that apartment. She watched her father die. By the time it was over, Raheem Grant had been shot 7 times. Here's a detail that a lot of true crime coverage glosses over, and it's one of the most important parts of this entire case. Investigators didn't have this recording right away. When police first arrived and began piecing together what happened, they were working with a scene, a body, and a suspect who was already telling them a story, that this was self-defense, that Grant had attacked her, that she had feared for her life. Initially, authorities were not able to pull evidence off Grant's phone. For a period of time, this case could have gone the way so many domestic violence homicide cases go, a he said, she said scenario, except the he was no longer able to speak for himself. But that phone didn't stay silent. Eventually, investigators were able to recover the footage and audio from Grant's device, and everything changed. What they found wasn't a chaotic split-second struggle. It was a documented 13-minute event, with Grant's own voice narrating his final moments and pleading with the mother of his child to stop. This is the piece of evidence that took the case from alleged to undeniable. Prosecutors now had something rare in a homicide investigation, the victim's own real-time account of his own murder. Sierra Harp was arrested and charged with malice murder and aggravated assault. Fast forward roughly a year and a half. The case finally reaches trial in Clayton County Superior Court. And from the outset, the defense strategy is clear. This was not cold-blooded murder. This was a woman defending herself against an abusive partner. Harp's legal team leaned on a defense you may have heard of in other high-profile domestic violence homicide cases, battered woman syndrome. The argument, broadly, is that a long pattern of abuse can alter a victim's psychological state to the point where they perceive lethal threat even in situations an outsider might not immediately recognize as life-threatening, and that this history should be weighed heavily when a jury considers whether a shooting was justified self-defense. It's a real, recognized legal and psychological framework. Courts across the country have accepted it in certain cases. The problem for Harp's defense was the tape. Because battered woman syndrome as a defense typically requires the jury to believe the shooting happened in direct response to an active, immediate threat. But what the recording captured wasn't a single defensive shot fired in a moment of terror. It was 7 gunshots spread across 13 minutes, with the victim conscious and pleading for his life in between them, including, according to reporting, asking for water and asking to hold his daughter. Prosecutors used that timeline against her relentlessly. This wasn't a woman who fired once and stopped. This was an event with a documented middle and end, one where Grant was audibly begging for it to be over. The state also brought forward a detail that would go on to define public memory of this trial. A family witness who did not take the stand to support the woman on trial, but to condemn her. If you followed true crime trials for any length of time, you know that family members almost always show up to support the accused. Parents cry in the gallery. Siblings hold hands. Even in the darkest cases, blood tends to close ranks. Not here. When Sierra Harp's own mother, Adrienne Thurmond, took the witness stand, she wasn't there for the defense. She was called by the prosecution, and what she said in that courtroom has become one of the most talked-about moments of the entire case. Staring directly at her daughter, Thurmond told her plainly that she had murdered Raheem and that trouble seemed to follow wherever her daughter went. She went on to describe Harp as manipulative and dishonest, someone who, in her words, revelled in disrespect and chaos. Reporters who covered the case said they had never witnessed anything like it, a homicide defendant's own mother tearing into her on the stand with that level of raw condemnation. But Thurmond didn't stop at testimony. During the sentencing phase, she went even further, asking the court to consider an almost unthinkable request, that Sierra Harp be sterilized to prevent her from having any more children. Let that sink in for a moment. A mother, in open court, asking a judge to take away her own daughter's ability to have children, because of what she had done to Raheem Grant. Not everyone in Harp's family agreed with that portrayal, though. Her uncle also testified, and he offered a very different picture, describing the home environment Harp grew up in as deeply toxic, suggesting that whatever happened in that apartment in 2017 didn't happen in a vacuum. On May 22, 2019, the jury returned its verdict: guilty on malice murder, guilty on aggravated assault. The self-defense narrative, the battered woman syndrome argument, the claims of abuse, none of it was enough to overcome 13 minutes of recorded audio capturing a man's final, pleading moments. Sierra Harp, 29 years old at the time, was now a convicted murderer, awaiting sentencing for the killing of the father of her child. Sentencing was initially expected to move quickly after the verdict, but it didn't. It was delayed until late June 2019, after one of Harp's attorneys left the case. When the day finally came, the Clayton County courtroom was packed with tension from two grieving, furious families who blamed each other as much as they blamed the system. Presiding over the case was Judge Robert Mack. Harp's defense team, hoping for leniency, asked the court to consider a sentence of just 5 years. 5 years, for a woman who had just been convicted of shooting the father of her child 7 times over a 13-minute span, all captured on his own phone in front of their daughter. Judge Mack did not agree. Before the sentence was handed down, Sierra Harp addressed the courtroom. She turned to face Raheem Grant's mother directly and asked for forgiveness. She told the court she hadn't been in her right state of mind, that alcohol was to blame, that none of it would have happened if she hadn't been drinking. She apologized to Geraldine Grant Bryson by name, calling herself truly, deeply sorry. It didn't move the judge. Judge Robert Mack sentenced Sierra Harp to 125 years in prison, not 25, not 50. 125 years, a sentence designed to ensure she would never again walk free. Effectively a life sentence delivered in a single, staggering number. For Raheem Grant's mother, Geraldine Grant Bryson, the sentence brought a strange, disorienting kind of relief, the kind that comes after years of trauma finally reach some sort of conclusion, but never actually heals the wound. She described the entire experience as feeling like a dream she couldn't wake up from, even after the sentence was read. She had been the one who told her son to start recording his encounters with Harp in the first place. In a very real sense, her instinct, a mother's desperate attempt to protect her son from a distance, became the exact piece of evidence that convicted his killer. That's almost impossible to sit with. The advice that couldn't save his life ended up being the reason his death didn't go unanswered. After the sentencing, Geraldine Grant Bryson took on a new role that no grandmother should ever have to step into under these circumstances. She became the caregiver for Raheem and Sierra's daughter, the same little girl who had been in that apartment the night her father was killed. According to later reporting, the child, referred to as Angel, has continued to be raised by her paternal grandmother in the years since. You'd think a 125-year sentence, backed by a recording of the crime itself, would be the end of the story. It wasn't. Years after her conviction, Sierra Harp's legal team went back to court, filing a motion asking a Clayton County judge to grant her a new trial. According to reporting on the hearing, Harp's attorneys argued several points: that her original trial counsel had been ineffective, that the trial court had shown partiality toward the state, and that the court had improperly restricted testimony from her own expert witness. Her legal team also argued that prosecutors had shifted their position over time regarding whether all 7 gunshot wounds contributed to Grant's death, or whether it was specifically the shot to the head that killed him, and in a twist that added yet another emotional layer to an already devastating case, one of the witnesses at that hearing was Raheem Grant's own sister, Lavoya Williams. Williams didn't come to bury her brother's memory. She came, by her own account, because she felt she had to tell the truth as she understood it. She acknowledged directly that what Harp did was wrong. that killing anyone is wrong. But she also testified that she believed Harp had endured serious mental and emotional abuse throughout the relationship with her brother. She told the court she didn't want to see Harp remain convicted under those circumstances. Under questioning, though, prosecutors got her to concede something significant. She admitted she had never personally witnessed her brother hit Sierra Harp. Geraldine Grant Bryson, Raheem's mother, pushed back hard against this entire effort. She maintained that her son never abused Harp, and said that if he had, she would have reported him to police herself. She offered her own theory about what may have driven Harp's actions. That Harp had grown jealous over her own relationship with her son, and resentful that she didn't have a child with him the way Harp did with Raheem. Speaking about the push for a new trial, she made her position clear. If you plan and carry out a murder, you should spend the rest of your life in prison. As of the most recent reporting, the presiding judge had not yet ruled on whether to grant Sierra Harp a new trial. The case, in other words, is not entirely closed. The legal fight continues, even years after that jury first delivered its verdict. Let's step back from the courtroom drama for a moment, because this case sits at the intersection of two things that are incredibly difficult to untangle: genuine intimate partner violence and lethal, premeditated-looking violence committed by someone claiming to be a victim. Domestic violence cases involving lethal outcomes are almost never simple. Prosecutors and defense attorneys alike will tell you that the line between victim who finally fought back and abuser who used a narrative of victimhood to justify violence can be agonizingly difficult to draw, especially when both people in the relationship allege abuse from the other. What made this case different, what took it out of ambiguous territory for the jury, wasn't a character witness or a psychological evaluation. It was time-stamped, real-time audio. A single act of self-defense, a person firing a weapon because they feared for their life in that exact moment, looks nothing like a 13-minute event with multiple gunshots and a victim who is coherent enough in between them to warn his attacker about prison and ask to hug his daughter. That's the piece that separated this case from so many others where the physical evidence simply can't tell the whole story. Here, thanks to a mother's warning to her son to start recording, and a phone that captured it all, the story more or less told itself. What makes this story continue to resurface, years after the sentencing, isn't just the horror of the crime itself. It's the way it keeps forcing people, jurors, judges, even the victim's own family, to sit with uncomfortable, competing truths at the same time. Was Raheem Grant, by all accounts from his own mother and his own recorded final words, a man who sensed the danger he was in and tried, right up to the end, to protect himself and warn the person hurting him? The evidence overwhelmingly says yes. Did Sierra Harp also experience some level of trauma, dysfunction, or abuse in that relationship, as her own sister-in-law and uncle have suggested? That's a question the courts are still, in some form, wrestling with, because Harp's team has continued to push for a new trial years after the original conviction. And in the middle of all of it is a little girl who watched her father die in that apartment, who is now being raised by the grandmother who once told her son to press record, never imagining that advice would end up outliving him in a courtroom 5 different times over. 125 years. That's the number a Clayton County judge landed on after hearing 13 minutes of a man's final moments, played back for a jury in his own voice. It's a sentence built not on speculation, not on theory, but on the chilling reality of what a phone, laid quietly on a table, was able to capture. Raheem Grant didn't survive that night. But because he listened to his mother, because he made the decision to press record instead of just reacting, his voice did survive. It survived long enough to convict the person who ended his life, and long enough to make sure a jury, a judge, and now audiences everywhere understand exactly what happened in that Clayton County apartment on December 29th, 2017. That's the case file for today. If this story hit you the way it hit our team while researching it, do 3 things for us. Subscribe to Crime Autopsy so you don't miss the next case breakdown. Drop a comment below telling us what part of this case affected you the most. Was it the recording, the mother's testimony, or the fight for a new trial that's still ongoing? And share this video with someone who needs to hear this story. We'll see you in the next autopsy.